Well, Merry Christmas week, Sunday school teachers and Bible study leaders. The Lifeway Explore the Bible lesson for this week departs from the book of Ezekiel and covers Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12 for Sunday, December 26th, the day after Christmas. We are not actually having Sunday school at First Baptist Angleton this week, and a number of our churches are not, but if you are on here looking, you are probably having Sunday school this week and looking for a little bit of help. So I at least wanted to post something that might be of a little bit of use to folks who are having to prepare a lesson this Sunday for Matthew 2, 1 through 12. It's a very familiar passage, and it has some great applications. I'm going to suggest some things to you and then also give you a resource where you can go and find a full sermon that I preached on this text that might be of help to you as well. I love this passage because it shows the ways that different people respond to the birth of Jesus that are very applicable to us today. So I like to entitle this lesson, Your Response to Christmas. One way you could introduce this story is with the story of a kindergartner in Britain who was commenting on the visit of the wise men to Jesus. He said they brought him gold, but he said Legos would have been better. So people respond to the birth of Jesus in different ways. Matthew doesn't tell us how many wise men there were. We know they brought gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh, but it doesn't say there were 3 men. But it does show us 3 distinct responses to the birth of Jesus that people still have today. And so the application I would make for my class is to ask them, what is your response to Jesus? We see 3 responses in this text. And what is your response to him going to be? Familiar story, but let's apply it. A number of people have what I would call the intellectual response. Verse 4 says, when Herod heard about Jesus' birth, he asked some Jewish religious leaders where the Christ was to be born. And they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so has been written by the prophet. And they quoted the chapter and verse. They knew exactly where this was. As we know, many of the Pharisees had the entire law memorized. They knew all the right answers. But just because they knew the right answers in their minds did not mean that they really responded rightly to the birth of Jesus. There's no indication these men ever actually went to Bethlehem to worship Jesus. They knew the answers, but they didn't respond to him from their hearts and really go to worship him. And that's one of the challenges that many of us longtime church members in churches have. It's easy to think you're right with God because you know some right answers about the Bible. But James 2 says, listen, the demons believe there's one God, but they're not saved by that. And we're not going to be saved just by having right knowledge either. Knowing mere facts won't save you. Just because you can quote John 3:16, just because you know the Christmas story doesn't mean you're going to heaven. You can know all these right things and still be lost. It said that many people will miss heaven by 18 inches from the distance from the head to the heart. The most important question for us today is not, do you know the right things about the birth of Jesus, but that you have personally repented of your sins and trusted Jesus' death on the cross to save you. So it's a good salvation lesson. And make sure that you have more than what the Jewish leaders had here, an intellectual response to Jesus this Christmas. Second, we see not only the intellectual response of the Jewish leaders, but the hypocritical response of Herod. In verse 8, Herod told the wise men, go and search carefully for the child, and when you have found him, report to me so that I too may come and worship him. That sounded like outwardly like he wanted to worship Jesus, but in reality, of course, he had something more sinister in mind. Verse 16 relates how later Herod had all the male children in and around Bethlehem killed. He had a selfish end in mind, to solidify his hold on the throne. His outward so-called worship was really hypocritical. And we can be like Herod today and put on a facade of worship when we're actually more concerned with our own personal agenda in church than really worshiping God. For example, Cheryl and I were once at a party where we met a certain politician from that town. I asked where he went to church, and he told me where he went. And then he added this little comment. He said, you have to go to church to get elected to anything in this town. Well, that spoke volumes to me. He wasn't as really concerned, he didn't seem to be really as concerned about going to church to worship as he was to get votes for his position. And so we need to each ask ourselves, why am I really in church? What's my motivation? Is it really to worship Jesus? or I have some other personal agenda to sell something, to get to be more popular, or whatever. Let's make sure that we don't have a hypocritical response like Herod did. And then thirdly, one of the best things we see in this passage is the genuine worship response of the Magi. As I said, we don't know much about the Magi, but one thing we do know, they truly came to worship Jesus. And you say, how do we know that? Well, we see several evidences of it in this text. First evidence we see of it is in verse 10, where it talks about their joy. They had genuine joy. It says, when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. Literally, it's mega joy. They had mega joy. Joy is from the heart, and the heart is essential for worship. Jesus said in John 4, those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. Worship comes from the heart, and that's what they had. So you could think about something and have your class think about something that they enjoy. Maybe their grandkids or football or hunting or whatever. When you are doing something you enjoy, nobody has to make you do that thing. You delight in it from your heart. You want to do it. You don't have to schedule it. You don't have to make yourself do it. You just delight in doing it. And that's how genuine religion is. When you really love God, worship's not something you have to do. It's something you want to do. Real worship has to begin in the heart. And so we need to each ask ourselves and confront your class with this. Are you just going through the motions at church, or you're really worshiping from your heart? Second sign of genuine worship is humility. Humility is joy, and now humility. Verse 11 continues, and they fell to the ground and worshiped him. It's of note that the Bible word for worship literally means to bow down to the ground and kiss towards an object of worship, to bow down and kiss towards an object of worship. It's humbling to do that. But real worship involves humbling ourselves before God. You cannot maintain pride and genuinely worship God. You can either keep your pride intact or you can worship God, but you can't do both. Jesus said no man can serve two masters. You can either serve your pride or you can serve the Lord and worship God, but you can't do both. So we need to ask ourselves, and in one question you might ask your class, when's the last time you humbled yourself in worship, knelt down, sought the Lord, responded at the altar, went and confessed a sin to the Lord, or humbled yourself and prayed to the Lord about something? Genuine worship involves humbling yourself before your king. And that's another sign of genuine worship that the Magi had. A third genuine sign of worship they had is their giving. See that in the famous part of verse 11. Opening their treasures, they presented to him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. Of course, our tradition of giving Christmas presents comes from that. But giving is a basic part of worship. When you really love someone, you want to give them gifts. I remember one of the first times Cheryl and I went Christmas shopping for our grandbabies. Afterwards, Cheryl said, man, if you want to get in the Christmas spirit, go shopping for kids at Toys R Us. We bought little soccer balls and a toy laptop and little metal pots and pans for the girl grandbabies. Nobody had to make us do that. We wanted to do it. We wanted to give them all these presents. When you really love someone, you want to give to them. That's why when we don't want to give to God, it's a spiritual indicator. If a person's not eager to give to the Lord, it's one of the biggest giveaway signs that something is not right in their heart. Now, Christianity is not all about money, as some people want to try to make it or assert that it is. But the truth is, money really is a thermometer that takes your spiritual temperature. And if that's so, what is your spiritual temperature? How is your giving to the Lord? It says a lot about your heart, because if you really love him, you're going to want to give. Giving is an integral part of genuine worship. And then finally, and there may be some other signs here, but I think this is the fourth major one I would point out, is obedience. A sign of genuine worship is obedience. Verse 12 says, and having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the Magi left their country, for their own country by another way. To me, this is perhaps the best sign of genuine worship. When the Magi left Jesus, they did what God told them to do. They were warned by him in a dream not to return to Herod, and they didn't. They did exactly what he told them. And that's what we should do. If we really worship him, we should obey him. Jesus said in Luke 6:46, why do you call me Lord, Lord, but don't do what I say? Your obedience shows how much you really love and worship the Lord. Years ago, St. Augustine of Hippo Regius back in the 300s wrote, a girl might say to her lover, "Don't wear that sort of cloak," and he won't. If she tells him in winter, "I like you best in your short tunic," he would rather shiver than offend her. Augustine's point was, if we truly love somebody, we want to please them. And that's how it is with the Lord too. If we really worship him, then we're going to do what pleases him. Jesus said, "If you love me, you'll keep my commandments." Listen, I think one of the major points here is that what we do in church doesn't reveal our love for God as much as how we obey him after we leave. Obedience is one of the best signs of genuine worship. So a lot that you can say there, but I would just wrap up the class and say, which of Matthew 2's characters here, of Herod and the Magi and the Jewish leaders, which one are you most like? Are you most like the religious leaders? It's all an intellectual game to you, but no heart response? Are you like Herod, outwardly appearing to worship God, but inwardly having another agenda? Or do you really have the heartfelt response of the Magi in humility and giving and obedience and worship from the heart? And just ask them, what is your response to Jesus this Christmas? So that's a little overview of the passage. I hope will help you. If you'd like a little bit more in depth on that, I have a full textual sermon on this passage at my website at www.shawnethomas.com. That's SHAWNETHOMAS.com. And if you'll go to the search bar there on that homepage and type in Matthew 2, 1 through 12 or your response to Christmas, that whole message will come up, and you can see some scriptural cross-references and illustrations and applications that I've made there, just expanding on this a little bit more from what I've given you. But I hope it will be of some help to you this weekend. God bless you as you share his word this Christmas weekend.